but fire ratings are 100%.
It ticks people off like me because I'm like, I was sold a bill of goods.
So first off, with most of these fire ratings, if you go to XYZ company, I call them the essential oil safe. Because they're owned by essential oil companies and
a company
actually,
that owns essential oils.
And actually,
we should get into safes for whatever reason that was,
and actually donate to a lot of politicians that are against Second Amendment rights. So you guys know who they are. You go to their site and read about their fire ratings. They flat out tell you that they're not regulated. They are doing their own fire ratings. Fire ratings, first of all, it's a misnomer. There's no fire in a fire rating. There's house fire ratings and there's all this other stuff. They're bake ratings. They're putting these things in a furnace. And so
this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Cryptic, Cryptic.com. Check them out. Now, Cryptic is a cool company. Not only are they God-fearing patriots and they're veteran-owned, but also they make unbelievable gear. No matter if you're hunting in the deserts of Sonora all the way up to sheep hunting in the Great North, they have a layer or layers for you. Plus, they have a bunch of cool patterns. Everything from Obscura all the way to Highlander, everything that you would need no matter where you hunt typically or that Nick's Great Adventure. So check them out, Cryptic.com. This episode is sponsored by Secureit, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secureit has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secureit.
Well, Josh, I appreciate you being here. We've been friends for numbers of years, and you're the marketing guru. I'm going to say, I don't know your actual title because titles are dumb, but you're the marketing guy for Secureit safes, and you have had a very colorful history. Before you were ever in the private sector, you were in the military, and you do a ton of cool stuff with vets, and this should be a really fun conversation every time we get together. And typically, we do it at a show. We do it at SHOT Show, and we go to dinner, and I hear some funny
Brazilian steakhouse stuff.
Oh yeah, funny Mexican or funny monkey stories. Everything from I haven't heard the South American thing. You told me to tell you. In fact, I got to write that down. Something about, was it Brazil? In the Amazon?
Oh, yeah, the Amazon, yeah.
Yeah.
That was
So Amazon, we got to get to that. But first off, let's just, describe, so the audience knows who and what you're doing. Describe a little bit about, your role at Secureit Safe Systems and what that is and why it's unique and why people should care about Secureit.
Well, it's fun for me because there's different facets of the job, right? And there's the civilian side, the e-commerce side, which is big, but then we also build a lot of military armories, and I look at all of the different government LEO orders that come in. I mean, the spreadsheet's over like 2,200 different agencies. Right, so we're selling products to Trump Secret Service, or it'll say Secret Service Trump Division, the Bidens, Obamas, and so there's a multitude of products.
Wait, let me stop you there for a second. For us layman civilians, What is an armory? What does that mean?
All right, so when we talk about like an armory, we're talking about like a major military, where everything from your small arms to your mortars to your Mark 19s to night vision, right? And so that's kind of how Tom got started. As we started upgrading all of our military after 9/11, there was, when I went to war in Iraq, there were still units that were using like M16s that looked like they were from Vietnam.
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you, when I went to basic training, I was using the web belt and suspenders, the same thing that I had as a kid.
Oh my gosh.
Growing up in the 80s. With the little green canteen and the canteen cup. So all of that stuff in an armory has to be not only accessible to the user, but for the armorer to see the serial numbers, to maintain inventory. I mean, it's sensitive equipment, right? You got to know if you got 100 night vision goggles, you got to know you got 100 every single time you check.
So the armorer is a person that goes by and checks all of your gear, checks all your person next to you's gear.
Right. Well, they're going to check it out to you. So, like, you're going to be assigned this serial number of an M4, this serial number of, whatever you're assigned to, and you're going to check it in and out to that armor. Now, this isn't in a combat zone.
Right.
Right. You've got that stuff that's already been checked out. You're going to have it the whole time. But, they're going to maintain these weapons. They're going to repair them. They're going to do all this. And so these are big armories. And so that's kind of what's cool is you've got the small projects like that we do with each civilian customer, but then you've got, we just finished a major project in Okinawa. We've done, most of the Army bases, most of the Special Forces units, most of the Navy SEAL units, we've built their armories. And that sort of carried over into that civilian side to give us both sides.
So when I had Tom, the founder owner, on a podcast, on this podcast earlier, and we talked about Secureit, we talked about who he was, and a little bit we touched a little bit on the business side of where he went. How did you guys go from designing these armaments to, hey, I think Joe Fanicknick might, Ike Eastman might want this in his house or in his office? Or
I think, just kind of like anything, sometimes it's just a conversation that ignites an idea. And, I'm speaking for Tom here. And so I don't know what he thought about previously, but I don't think it was a priority for him to move to the civilian market. I think he'd been kind of thinking about it because when you do government military work, it's a roller coaster. It's a yo-yo of ups and downs and up and it's not like you can count on consistent income, daily and monthly. And he had a conversation with some SEALs after they built an armory, and they were like, "We need just something for our own personal equipment." And that's sort of when the Agile 52 was born. And from there, that design is sort of how it got its push into that civilian market. And it started out slow, but I think as Tom started innovating and thinking like, okay, we have to make a safe that we can get to wherever we want to in the, we have to be able to ship it UPS and FedEx and not have to go freight. And so that's why that piece, it lays flat, it ships, can go on your front door. But it really started with, we want something to lock our personal stuff up with, whether we live off base or on base.
And it's something you're familiar with, and it works. You guys, the fortunate thing for us civilians is you guys put in a ton of research and development using these armaments as the guinea pigs to find out the best, most logical way to organize the gear. I don't have night vision, but I got a backpack, I have a weapon, I have ammo.
Very good point. And so
binos.
the 101st is a very different unit than a SEAL unit. They have completely different equipment. They have different storage needs. And so that cradle grid and the system allows that armorer to put together what he needs for that unit.
Yeah.
101st doesn't have scuba gear.
Right.
And so what all that stuff, the way it's stored, scuba gear is probably not stored in the armory. That was probably a bad idea.
But the point is right. It's not the same. Everybody's got slightly different stuff.
Right. And you could even go, what works better for one unit might not be perfect, but as long as you have the backbone and the accessories and the ability to organize in a customizable way, I think that's the important thing, right? It's because it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And for me, I've got a bunch of ARs, I've got a bunch of long guns, I've got a bunch of pistols. I know I've got buddies that don't own one single bolt action rifle.
Yeah.
They all they own is ARs. My grandfather owned one rifle and had a giant collection of Derringers.
That's who he was. So one of the things that, you're out here in Powell, Wyoming, and we're doing some stuff with Secureit, and we're outfitting our brand new building. We remodeled this building. It was built in the 30s. Cool building. We're kind of outfitting it with organizing, and obviously we have weapons, we have ammo, we have all this stuff coming in and out, and using Secureit is going to be awesome. But one of the things that I worry about, and I was really worried about, is, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, God dang it, where do I start? It's almost overwhelming. It's too many choices. I don't know where to start. I'm not going to do anything. Where would you suggest a guy starts with that?
So, I mean, we all get overwhelmed, right? When there's too many choices and there's too many things. I mean, what I would say with just like anything, start small and then build up, right? And get an idea, learn the system. And if you've just got a couple of guns and you need something locked away, an Agile 52. I talk about my brother-in-law, Omar. My brother-in-law owns 2 rifles and owns a pistol. That's probably all he's buying. So a Fastbox 47 worked great for him. And it goes underneath his bed and he can lock those away. So I think for me, getting that Agile 52 is a great first place, and that's our number one seller. That's the one that, and so the modularity, true modularity, not like, I think there's some safe companies out there who have not looked up the definition of modularity. So that can just be added on. You don't have to go solve all your storage needs right away. You can just piece it, and so, that Agile 52, it's easy to get around. You could take it apart if you are moving. And like I told you, most of these big safes, I mean, that's the number one thing that gets left behind in a move, because it becomes cheaper to buy a new safe than it does to move it.
Yeah, my safe from XYZ company, if it wasn't in my garage, it wouldn't be in my new garage.
Right.
Because I had to move it with a forklift. It's not easy. If it was in the basement or even in my house, it'd be like accessory, moving on. It's like the refrigerator. You can have it.
I remember a safe was our house that we had before this. And I'd gotten it. It's, just a normal safe. And I'm like, okay, great. And there was 2 steps coming up into my house. The guy
from the garage
pulls it up to the garage. And I was like, I was pretty ignorant. This is, a long time ago. And I was like, oh, well, we're not going to move it into here. He had all the equipment. He was like, nope, my job is to right here. And I'm like, dang.
I did you a favor by getting it in the garage. I was going to leave it on the sidewalk.
And so, that's, then you're hiring a safe company to move it up. I mean, you can get a couple of buddies, and sometimes with certain safes you can get it up there. But I mean, once that thing tips over, I mean, it's going through your drywall or whatever. It's not an easy.
It's a 400-pound animal. So kind of back to the modularity of it. They're cool because they're modular. Lots of different options. You have, you have storage bins. You have, things that hold pistols this way, and you have shelves, and you have clip holders, and you have hooks, and you have, all of these different things. And that's kind of where I got overwhelmed. But you said start small. You said start with a 52. So a 52 is 52 inches tall,
right?
20 inches wide, 16 inches deep. So it is a cabinet.
Essentially, yeah.
It's a cabinet that you put your guns in. It has a lock. It has a code lock. 1, 2, 3, 4
biometrics.
Biometrics for a thumb or fingerprint. You can store up to 30 fingerprints in that, right? So I got 10. My wife has 10, maybe a kid or 2. The other thing about that is fire safety. And a lot of these other safe companies have toted fire. It's fire. Everything's going to be safe in a fire. And you get this comment a lot. Let's talk about that. What does that mean?
Look, I told you earlier that when I talk about this, when Tom talks about this, it really ticks people off.
Yeah.
but fire ratings are 100% bullshit.
It ticks people off like me because I'm like, I was sold a bill of goods. This isn't real.
You know what else we were sold? The food pyramid.
Yeah, no kidding.
And you know who came up with the food pyramid? The USDA. Back in 1880, they started creating these food pyramids.
You can't have eggs. Oh wait, now you can have eggs.
I mean, the food pyramid that we were taught growing up told us that we had to limit red meat, limit oils, limit this, limit this. I mean, it basically pushed towards this whole grain and sugar thing. Guess what we got? We got a bunch of obese kids, and I can't correlate to the allergies and everything else that we have, but I can tell you that when I went to school,
RFK can, Junior.
I didn't know one single kid that had a peanut allergy. I didn't know one. Now when I go eat lunch with my kids, there's a whole table and a slew of kids. Yeah. And we've got a girl in the neighborhood that, like, her great kid. Her parents don't have any allergies. Her parents have to make all of her food. Like, she used to come over to play and whatnot, would have to literally put them in these little things. The number one selling decongestant that had been sold since the 70s. Last year, FDA came out and was like, actually, we did some more studies on it. It doesn't work. So all I'm saying is what you've been told is not always right. So first off, with most of these fire ratings, if you go to XYZ company, I call them the essential oil safe. Because they're owned by essential oil companies and
company
actually,
that owns essential oils.
And actually,
we should get into safes for whatever reason that was,
and actually donate to a lot of politicians that are against Second Amendment rights. So you guys know who they are. You go to their site and read about their fire ratings. They flat out tell you that they're not regulated. They are doing their own fire ratings. Fire ratings, first of all, it's a misnomer. There's no fire in a fire rating. There's house fire ratings and there's all this other stuff. They're bake ratings. They're putting these things in a furnace. And so, look, we want to protect everything we can from a fire, right? But if I go off of that safe company's idea where they're going to test how many minutes it takes before the inside of the safe gets 1,200 degrees. So 1,200 degrees, basically they say a house fire gets up to 1,200 degrees really, really quick. But a lot of people contend it would go faster because there's winds moving through. It's not a static environment. It's very chaotic.
Or a furnace.
Think about a wildfire.
Yeah.
You see those things and what they do. Okay, so if we're talking 1,200 degrees, let's forget that. So because aluminum starts melting at 1,200 and a few extra degrees. Everything else, wood starts burning at 150. Plastic starts melting at 180. So the ramp up to this inside of your safe, alloys start going anywhere from 220 to, depending on the alloy. Every spring is done. It's toast. Your molded stock is melting. You have no idea how hot it's getting inside there. Like the idea that you can put 2 extra pieces of sheetrock in between some steel and protect everything inside of a fire that's going to get 2,000 degrees. Like, it's
crazy. And who's going to shoot that gun?
It's just a math problem, right? And if you think about it, if you just, instead of getting mad at me when I say this, think about it. All this stuff is melting. Are you really going to go shoot that gun?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I have great grandpa's 30-30 in there, and did it completely disintegrate as a white ash? No, but it's not usable, and It doesn't represent what it once was. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So, you know why I would get mad? I would get mad and go, "You're telling me there's no way I can safe these, safeguard this memorabilia if it's grandpa's gun or a pistol or my wedding certificate or photos of my kids when they're little." Of course, that doesn't happen now with digital, but all that stuff it doesn't matter.
Well, that stuff that's important to you, that is paper, because if wood's going to start burning at 150,
what's paper?
Paper's gone. I mean,
110.
It's going to have to go in a safety deposit box, and that's going to go to a bank. It's going to be surrounded by concrete. It's going to be surrounded by sprinklers, and it's going to put it out. The idea that you can magically fight fire with this stuff. Because you got to think about let's say the fire department comes into your house, it's burning down. They're going to shower it with water. Safes aren't waterproof.
No.
And so any bit of water gets in there, you've got a corrosive environment now from all this heat. You're going to have rust. You're going to have pit. I mean, that's in a best case environment. I mean, you're probably going to have mostly ash, because the other thing is the heat, just like if you're cooking with a green egg.
Which is a barbecue.
Yeah, a barbecue.
Smoker.
Yeah. The heat stops. I mean, it'll actually continue to rise, and okay, so if your house burns down, how quick are you getting to open up your safe?
Yeah, it's going to be days at the minimum, maybe weeks before the fire department does their investigation and the insurance takes photos and all that stuff before you open your safe and it's been corroded and, open up a safe full of water. Who knows what else is in there?
And all I'm saying is, like, you just can't buy into all this crap. It's just like there's one company that pushes it harder than anything else, and they come from essential oils. They come from a place that they want to give out backdoor access codes without a warrant in due process. They come from a place that is not in line with your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And so that's who's selling this stuff. Like, we have never once, ever been asked by the U.S. military, a foreign military, or a police, hey, what's the fire rating for this gun storage? Because they know it
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's absolutely, if the police station burns down, they're going to move on, get the insurance, and go. Like, it's
so. Okay, let me ask you that. You bring it up, so I'm going to ask you. You don't give the codes away.
No.
Is there a code?
There is no code. And I can hardly make a Facebook post or anything without getting, hey, do you guys give out access codes to the FBI? Whatever. So to store, maintain these access codes, it takes time, money, energy, and manpower, right?
There's no return on that investment other than if you are keeping them so you can give them to the FBI.
I can't even understand why you would dedicate resources to keep all these codes. Now, maybe they say, oh, well, if a customer gets locked out. I don't see that being a great trade-off, because when you're turning in your warranty, you're also putting in your address.
It's a good way to track it.
And so on most of our safes, the Agiles and the Answers that we're talking about, there's a keypad entry. There's a biometric fingerprint. And, one good thing about that is, like, if you don't want somebody seeing what you're putting in, your kids, because your kids watch.
Yeah.
Your kids are like, he's putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have a manual override key that we want you to hide somewhere else, that if you need to use it, you can do. It's a manual key. That's how we do it. We do not store, maintain any access codes.
I love the manual key. The manual key, and it's not like a master lock key. It looks like the old jailhouse, big old long tube on it. Which doesn't probably need to be, but I'm sure it's done on purpose. It looks like the old jailhouse that Andy Griffith would freaking open the door.
Oh yeah, to get Otis out.
Yeah, 100%.
I've had this comment on Facebook and other social media pieces like, oh, you guys are just full of crap. If the FBI or the ATF came calling, you'd have to give it out. We don't have it.
Yeah. There's nothing to give.
There's nothing to give.
Doesn't exist.
Nothing.
Wow.
And Tom's done the research much more than I have. We can't find another safe company that really, a major safe company that maybe they don't, but they sure don't advertise that they don't keep these access codes.
Really?
And so I don't know what the purpose is of keeping them, but
everybody does it. But
this thing happened,
or seems that way.
What was it, last October? And it is still going.
Well, so my dad, Ike Eastman, I was telling him that you were coming up here all the way to Powell, Wyoming, and sit down. We're going to do some stuff in the building and sit down for a podcast. And he didn't ask any other question other than, do they get their codes out? I said, I don't think so, but I'm going to find out.
anybody that's interested to see how much of a flame point this has been, if you were to just get on YouTube and
Oh my God.
search gun safe backdoor access codes, I don't know. There's probably 3,000-4,000 videos out there. Like, I mean, there's more videos on that than how to like bake a cake.
Yeah.
And so it has obviously touched a nerve, but the people that have touched the nerve are the same ones that are telling you, hey, we do our fire ratings. They're not regulated. We do them ourselves, but we do a really good job on the fire ratings.
Right.
And you guys should listen to us because this safe can maintain 1,200 degrees for 35 minutes.
Yeah.
Nothing inside the safe can maintain 20, And I told you guys the story about the side-by-side that caught on fire.
Yeah.
That thing caught on fire. The fire department, which, I'll skip a bunch of that story to keep some companies out of it. Caught on fire, burnt down. We put it out 30 minutes later. We noticed that the aluminum wheels were melting. It looked like the Terminator.
Just going across
the second
desert
Terminator,
floor.
just going. So you're talking, you're 1,200 plus it takes to melt aluminum. But that happened after.
30 minutes after
we
the fire
put
was
the
out.
fire out. Okay, back to, are you going to shoot that gun? The nicest, and I really don't know the stats on what a carbon fiber barrel.
Yeah, I don't know.
I really don't know.
It's got to be, temperature's got to be a factor, right?
But I know steel starts to temper at 500 degrees. So if they are correct with their own fire rating, that it didn't get over 1,200 degrees in 35 minutes.
Doesn't matter.
I
ain't shooting it.
At 5 minutes, it got to 500, and the steer still started temp.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to X-ray. You're going to have to do you're not shooting those guns. Now, if you got your grandpa's 30-30 and it survived and you can still put it up there to look at, but
yeah, not going to shoot it. So I know Secureit is a big part of what you're doing, but it's not the only thing you're doing. You're doing a ton of other stuff in life. You have a very interesting background. And honestly, the first time I met you, you were part of an organization called Texas Trophy Hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Were you the publisher then? I can't remember.
I was the vice president of operations and the producer of the TV show.
Okay, so they had a TV show on the Outdoor Channel, and the owner of that organization we had with mutual friends, basically. So you have that background. But let's rewind all the way back to what you did. Like, where did you grow up? How did you get into hunting? What were you into in high school?
So I grew up actually in the mountains in Virginia. So right outside of where Virginia Tech is. And
Whoa.
Yeah.
I thought you were a Texas
No,
boy.
I married into Texas.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I thought your wife was from Colorado.
No, that's a whole, but she's from Texas, but they live in Colorado. I'll have to get to that one. About half the year. So I grew up in the mountains. I fished nonstop. And my dad didn't hunt, right? And so, it kind of turns out I wasn't real close with my dad, right? And he would try to take us fishing every, once in a while. And man, there was myself and another friend. All we wanted to do was hunt. My God.
Really?
And we had access.
Small town
yeah,
living?
small. My graduating class, Radford, was, I think, 106.
Nice. It's like living in Powell.
Yeah, And, man, we had access. So if anybody knows, the Radford Army Arsenal used to make nitroglycerin during the Cold War. And there's a river valley there, so we used to have to B-2 bombers would come practice and do that stuff. But that arsenal, they have this limited draw hunt there. And I run into people all over the country. They're like, "Oh my God, you lived in Radford? Did you ever get to hunt the arsenal?" No, I didn't. You had to go. It's kind of funny because you had to kill a doe in the first drawing, and you had to shoot. If you were bow hunting, you had to hit this. It was very unscientific. It was a pie plate.
Oh.
And you had to hit in it like 2 out of 3 times with your arrow.
It's
or whatever.
some distance.
Yeah, 20. But we had my buddy's aunt owned all of the cornfields down below it, and we couldn't kill a deer because we had no idea what to do. We had nobody to tell us. We would literally climb up a tree and just sit on a branch with our bear whitetail 2 that was taller than us.
This explains so much about who you are.
So but man, I knew how to fish. I knew how to fish, and a woman that taught with my mom at school, her husband, he ended up becoming the chief of police, Donnie Goodman. He kind of showed me how to shoot a bow and taught us a bunch of stuff, and so we got more and more into hunting, and just our dads weren't into it. And,
shameless plug. Take a kid hunting.
Oh, that's my favorite thing in the world. I love sharing, what Donnie did for me. I don't think he ever really, I should probably tell him that. That's kind of a crappy thing. I don't think I've ever told him that.
You're to blame. It's your fault.
I mean, I haven't talked to him in, years and years, but I mean, he just kind of like goes, okay, this is how we do it. And there's so many things that's like, so I'm not supposed to just climb up a tree with my bow. I mean, I was literally taking my bear whitetail 2, putting it over my head.
Climb up the tree from branch to branch.
And he was like, no.
You're going to fall out of there and kill yourself, kid.
And, that's kind of how I grew up. I mean, you think about in the summers, I played baseball, mowed grass, and we would fish once a day. And so the Brittle brothers, who I grew up with, their dad would get us these yards. We basically just had a yard mowing thing that was going on. They love fishing. They love baseball. Ryan ended up being a college baseball coach. Eric ended up working as a state fisheries biologist. And then I ended up in the hunting industry. We've now fast forwarded a lot, but I had a lot of friends that we loved the outdoors, and they hunted. I'd go with them some too. And I just was eaten up with it. Like, I mean, Jim Crumley's tree bark, and like, I'll never forget, and then I got my first overdraw on my PSC.
Oh yeah. Well, you can wing it. You can wing that 200, 220.
Yeah.
You really got her going.
Shooting a crossbow bolt out of a compound bow. I was telling somebody young the other day, I was like, did you ever know that we used to do these overdraws? And they're like, why would you do that? I'm like, I don't know. It just was a fad.
Well, it was a thing to get more speed out of it.
And you got more speed out of it.
Some whitetail jumped our string. We're not going to have that. By God, there's got to be his technology somewhere.
I'm going to shorten that sucker up like the Greeks did in Thermopylae. And so, I ran track in high school, and I ended up going to college and ran track.
So I didn't know that. What did you run?
I ran the 4 and the 8, and man, I went to East Tennessee State where my uncle did. And it doesn't sound like a big pond, but I mean, my roommate, Zach Whitmarsh, was a Canadian Olympian.
Wow.
Other good friend, Catherine, I don't think she was right there at making it to the Olympics. But if you go back, and it's sad to watch what's happened in athletics, and that's a whole other tangent that's going on.
Agreed.
But I mean, that program used to be, top 5 in the country in cross country, and Coach Walker was he was an old Indianapolis Colts offensive lineman, and he coached football for a little bit, and then they were like, "Hey, do you want to coach cross country and track?" And I'd say he kind of he had a hardcore mentality to coaching that didn't quite fit. You got on this train and you ran as fast as that train, or you just fell off and you broke. But he took the mentality of kind of that you hear when people talk about college football today, like it's not as much about the X's and the O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. So he was like, okay, I can't recruit these Americans to the same level that the University of Tennessee or the University of Florida or Arkansas is. So he went to Ireland.
Really?
And started bringing over all these Irish kids. And it was interesting for me because in college, I'm all around all these Irish guys, and I can't even hardly, the boggers. You're like,
that's not
What
even
are you
English.
saying? Like,
Like a vowel.
Yeah, and And so, that was just an interesting time. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do in college. I changed majors a whole bunch and got into writing. And so that's what I was going to be, was this writer. So, and I've fast forwarded through these pieces here a good bit. And I am taking it's like a writing for business class. And the guy who's teaching it owns this ad agency. So he just said, hey, I need some help with copyright and stuff. So I started interning and started working for them. And never really meant to go into marketing and advertising, but that's kind of where, and man, I loved it. I was working on some cool stuff. I got to work on this like banana fiber project. I was doing some side consulting as well. Did some stuff for Texas Pete and did some stuff for this, and it was really fun. And then I started working on hardwood flooring catalogs. And I was like, this isn't very much fun.
How do I make look the grain of wood sound sexy?
I'm coming up with different names for different shades of brown. And that's when 9/11 happened. And I started like going, man, I think I want to join the Army, or I think I want to go do this.
So you were still in college?
No, I was out by this point.
Okay.
I was out. And so a buddy of mine, he, right after it happened, he did it. He was able to get a Ranger contract. God, you couldn't get a Ranger contract after that to save your life. Black Hawk Down had ruined that for most people. I just felt left out. Like it's the only way I can describe it. Like it wasn't a choice.
Really?
I felt left out. And so I would love to sit here and say like, yes, it was all my patriotic duty and whatever. And I mean, I'm sure that played into it. Home. But I felt like I was sitting on the sidelines while everything was going on. So that's kind of where.
So I got to make a note about that because I'm going to come back to that. So 9/11 happened, and you decide, okay, I'm going to start going to recruiters.
That's funny.
Every one of them.
I went to all of them. Yes. The Air Force's marketing was, we have the best food. I swear to God.
Well, honestly, if you think about it, though, think about that. You're a marketer. Think about that. Your demographic is 18 to 25, let's call it. Food was a big deal at my age.
Hey,
when I was that age, I was like, I couldn't get enough of it.
You fast forward to where I'm in Iraq now. And I've been staying at this Iraqi army base. We get hit on the road. We're just dirty. We're nasty. We're trying to get our Humvees fixed, and we get to go. We have to stop this air base, Balad. And I go in, and I'm like, oh my God! Like our chow hall where we were staying in Muqtadiya at that first deployment was the morgue. Our tables, we were eating on the slabs that they put dead Iraqis in during the Iran-Iraq war.
Oh,
kid you not. And so we were eating sea rations. So we're in Balad for the first time. I'd never seen it. I'm like, oh my God, what is? And I'm just, it's a big KBR chow hall, and we're like eating. And this Air Force lieutenant is freaking out, yelling. She's like, this is the second morning in a row we do not have mango juice. And I was like, they've got mango juice.
They got juice.
So the Air Force, yes, it does. And I talked to the Navy a little bit. Marines weren't me. I wasn't a high and tight guy. And what's funny is that I actually went into the Army under the 18 X-ray Special Forces program, which is the greatest infantry recruiting tool ever made by the Army.
What is that?
So basically they're like, hey, you want to be Special Forces? You come right in. We'll put you through the pipeline. You'll go through right here. And if you don't make it, which you probably won't, you're going to infantry needs of the Army.
But you're still get to fight.
Yep. But
you're not like if you wash out and budge, you're going to probably be scraping rust off a freaking ship.
Yeah, and you're going to be a seaman.
Yeah.
Sorry, Navy guys.
This episode is sponsored by Sawyer Products. Sawyer is a cool company that provides not just great products like water filtration systems, first aid kits, insect repellent, and sunscreen. They also are giving clean drinking water to people around the world. Every time you buy a water filter, be it the small one for your water bottle or the one you hook onto a garden hose, you and Sawyer are helping a developing country with good, clean water systems. Their insect repellent is astonishing. They even have some you spray on your clothes or your pets to keep those creepy, nasty crawlies away. Their sunscreen works so well you only have to apply a few times a day versus every 50 minutes with the other guys. It is truly amazing. So go get some Sawyer products that not only work great, but also give back to the communities around the world. Check them out at Sawyer.com and tell them you heard it at Eastmans. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Hornady. They make some of the best, most accurate, dependable ammo on the planet. No matter if you're coyote hunting or plinking steel or hunting big game out west or even going to Africa, they make a bullet or an ammo just for you. Some of the most accurate and dependable ammo on the planet. Also, check out my podcast with Steve Hornady and learn about ammo as well as their story and some funny anecdotes from Steve.
You know,
I just stole that. I just stole that. I just did a podcast the other day with Mike, I think he's a first sergeant in the Army, and he's the one that just said that. He's like, at least in the Army, if you watch out, you still get in the fight.
So the 18X, right? It's a great recruiting tool because you got guys that are like, oh, I'm just going to go right through SF, and I mean, the odds of there's a reason that SF in the history took older, more mature people, and so. Anyway, I started looking at this thing, and I'm like, all right, the Iraq War is getting ready to happen. I'm going to miss the Iraq War because this pipeline is like 2.5 years long. I'm not going to make it. So I went back, and I was like, can I get out and go straight into the military? And they were like, yeah. And I'd never heard of a cavalry scout, reconnaissance and whatnot. So they showed me this video, and there's like dune buggies and dirt bikes. And I was like, yeah. There's no dune buggies.
Delta Force, the Delta Force movie shows up.
There's no dune buggies and dirt bikes. Like that
doesn't exist.
But they were in that video, and it's funny because everybody at that time was like, oh yeah, there's dune
Chuck
buggies
Norris
got me
is
too.
The actor.
Yeah. I just walk everywhere. So that's kind of how I ended up in the Army. And, the first time around, when I got out of basic training, I had airborne in my contract. And they were like, at that time, it was crazy, the amount of people that were like coming in. Like they were doing what I was doing, quitting their jobs.
9/11.
It was crazy.
A lot of guys.
And so they're like, hey, all you airborne guys, look, there's no airborne slots. Here's your choices. You can either stay here and work for the drill sergeants who have been yelling at you for the last year, or you can have duty station of choice. And so I was like, I'll take Europe, hoping that I would get Italy and still be able to go to Europe. When you pick Europe, though, you get there and they do whatever they want. So I ended up getting to a unit, 2-2 infantry over by Vilsik, Germany, and the unit I went to was back in Kosovo at the time. So it was kind of, we call it rear detachment. So everybody's kind of waiting for them to kind of get back. I'm just doing pull-ups one day, and one of I call him first sergeant, but he was really E7. He was just the acting first sergeant. He just kind of came by and he was like, Kinser, you went to college, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, stop doing pull-ups. Go get dressed. You're going to go learn Arabic. And they were just doing these Arabic, it was like, basically I just bussed back and forth over to Grafenwehr and did this Arabic class. And so that's kind of how Arabic came in. And
I didn't know you knew Arabic.
Yeah. And that's kind of what got me into doing where we went, right? And I know anybody listening is like, what he's talking about is not real. It's how it happened. And when I got there, I didn't think, I was like, okay, I'll use a little bit. Well, the first deployment, we didn't have interpreters like the colonel did, the other people did. And so I get called down to the TOC one time, and they're like, hey, we got this detainee that's got shot. We need you to talk to him and interrogate him. I'm like,
well, I know how to say, where's the bathroom?
Yeah. So that's what I'd learned, right? So when you start learning French or Spanish, it's like, you know how to go to the library.
Yeah.
You know how to go to the tea shop, or you know how to do this. And so I run back, I grab my dictionary, and I come back, and my buddy, who was my section sergeant at the time, Johnny Taylor, he was like asking me, he's like, what do they have you doing? I'm like questioning this guy. And so I'm like and it's just like when you get thrown in the deep end, you don't have a choice but to learn.
Sink or swim, baby.
And so I just kind of developed that. From there, we got attached to, I was just telling this story for some of the airborne stuff we were doing, but was attached to 10th Group for a while. And what we were doing is going after 10th Group Special Forces. So they took our platoon, and we were like their force multipliers to cordon for them and do all that. Learned a lot from them. And because I was one of the more athletic guys that could climb, I got to be on the dismount team. So I got to learn a lot more of the interrogation process and how to do this stuff. And, for those couple of months, there was a lot of fighting going on. We didn't fire a shot.
Really?
We just went on raids every night and kidnapped people. But you saw how effective it was to not kick in the door and do this big procession, but sneak in, go get who you want. I always say kidnapping guys because it sounds more funny, but
that is what it was, though. You've told me stories where
Jag wouldn't like what I'm saying, but you know what? All you Jag officers out there, you can go to.
You've told me stories where you just literally picked guys up out of the dark, and they had no idea where they were headed and what was going on.
And that, I tell you, what's hard for people to understand is like when you would kick in a door and make a whole bunch of noise in like an Iraqi household. Especially after the war, there were multiple family groups living in the same house. And so you'd go in the door and there's 10 kids laying on the floor and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, and the moment you set that alarm off, you're just.
It's chaos. It'd be like running through kindergarten at recess.
And then you got a bunch of kids trying to get up and there's dudes with night vision. I mean, it's terror, So, and that was like the old Iraq war. That was like where we had AK-47s and RPGs in the back of the Humvees. And
you were using Vietnam era stuff.
Well, we just had all this crap. You'd find RPGs and be like, hey, we could use some of those and throw them in the back. And the Jag came down on that stuff too. But
hey, Johnny, take that, put it in the back of a fiberglass Humvee.
So, it was an interesting deployment. I mean, we lost a lot of guys. We ended up being in Fallujah attached to the Marines, and we were one of two Army dismounted platoons that were in the second retaking of Fallujah. And that was different than any other aspects of, and we'd been into some stuff, and I tell this story like I'm not bragging about this, but I remember I'm just trying to explain how it felt because I had read Ernest Hemingway and I'd read all this stuff about the first time you kill somebody.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is going to be like this major event, right? And I remember we were driving into Joff. A guy pops up to the right. I'm up on the 240. I look over, and a guy's got an RPG. And I just pointed the gun at him, pulled the trigger, and I saw bits of clothes fly off, and I moved to the next target. And I never felt anything. Never. Like, I was just like, and to me at that time, I'd been in a couple of little shootouts, but it wasn't. And I was like, God, something wrong with me? Like, why don't I feel something? Like, Ernest Hemingway said I should have felt something about this. Right. Like, right?
Right.
And then to me, I mean, I was trying to think, like, what's wrong with me here? And then when you started seeing your own guys get killed, that's when you feel bad. Like, there's no reason to feel bad about that guy that tried to kill you. And I just kind of processed that. But I was expecting to have this,
did it ever change?
Moment. No. I mean, you seeing dead bodies is not something that's good for anybody, right? It's a strange, but like the stuff that I remember, the stuff that I hate is just like the guys that you see get torn up in different pieces, right? But I just had it wrong. I had it,
you thought it went both directions.
Yeah. And And I think I don't know. That's for me personally. I don't know if that's universal. But when that guy was pointing an RPG at us, I didn't give two shits. I gave what I cared about were the guys in our Humvee.
Right.
Not right. Or I was going to risk feeling bad about everybody that I allowed to get injured. So, but I just, that was a different time in the war because IEDs really hadn't come up yet. They would pop up and try to shoot at you, and it's kind of like, okay, well, we'll shoot at you too. And it was just a weird thing. Fallujah was much different. Fallujah was much more organized and whatnot. So I get back, and then we go into, I get to go back to airborne school. They're like, okay, you can go. And I get to go to the 82nd and then go to 573 Cav, this RISTA unit, Reconnaissance, Surveillance, Target Acquisition. And I loved it there. I loved the people. I loved the team I was on. I loved the mentality. Like, it was...
Is it different? Was it different there than anything else because you were with them longer, though?
No, I think the regular Army is really strict. Like, they want you to do, like, the exact exercises in the training manual, side straddle hop, which is a jumping jack. But 82nd was like, hey, just go exercise. Go, and it allowed us to do some pretty cool stuff. And so we go to JRTC and we're training, and they have Iraqi guys there that are playing like what we call OP4, the opposition forces. And so I just started speaking Arabic, and I was doing this, and my commander came in and was like, excuse me, like, what is happening here? And Captain Few, he really came up with this idea. He's like, okay, I got Kinser over here that has been and done some stuff that has been attacked. I've learned some process, and he can speak Arabic. Like, I'm going to use it. And so what we developed, we kind of made me this intel, right? Because you've got intel that came down, but when you're in the little areas like that dissemination of information is not great, right? But like,
you're taking intel that's days old, weeks old, whatever.
So if I'm in Bozeman, right, and I'm in charge of intel, you're going to know what's going on in Powell better than what.
Right. Then
yeah. And what you learn real quick when you start reading these DIRs, Defense Intelligence Reports, you learn that about 96% of them are bull crap, right? And people read them like they're the Bible, but this happened to me so many times. I'm like, okay, this guy's Al-Qaeda. And then you go kind of find out that it was really a goat dispute. This is actually, I'm not making this up.
This is an actual thing. I can tell this is a story.
It was over a goat grazing dispute that the neighbor got so mad he went and told the Americans that this guy was Al-Qaeda.
Oh my God.
To try to solve the goat grazing.
It's a playground
dispute. So all this stuff is like polluted. There's so much you have to wade through when you're getting these reports, and you go through them. And so we developed kind of this, like, we're there, and that's what I did and used it. And I think over time, I've always found traveling in a different country, if you can attempt to speak the language, you get into doors that you don't. And whether it be the Iraqi army or the Iraqi police, it just helped us. And I think I was pretty good at what I was doing, but I loved it. So I worked, like, because I was solving problems and doing that. And man,
oh, you were a convict
freaking
too.
Loved it.
So do you still speak Arabic?
I haven't spoken it in years, but I can still shaku maku if I want to, and kishi maku, and I think it's something that I'd obviously have to start practicing again.
Yeah.
But
all because a first sergeant said, "You went to college."
That was it.
And he probably got somebody above him said, "You need to send somebody.
You
to
have
the
a
school.
quota that you have to meet," and he couldn't meet it. And then I just happened to be doing pull-ups that day, and he's like, "Oh, that SOB you went to college."
I forgot he went to college. He's teachable.
And I studied it more after that and did some stuff with it, but where we were at that time, I mean, we were dealing with the formation of ISIS, and I don't think we quite had a grasp on just the gravity of what was happening around us. And I mean, it was a very hard deployment. I mean, we lost a lot of guys. We are continuing to lose guys from that deployment. We just lost one like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was such a different deployment from the first time. Such a different deployment. Like it was IEDs, it was beheadings, it was wild. And you know, we'd be watching CNN and they're talking about it's not a civil war, it's not a civil war. Well, last night I sat up on top of a roof and just watched the Civil War happen. And so, you know,
so it was kind of like what the Vietnam vets were looking.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a war. This isn't a war. Oh, it sure feels like one.
It's, you know, and so I'll tell you the story. I know I try to let people know like how much Iran was involved. And you got to remember, I'm reading these reports that other guys weren't reading and paying attention. I was immersed in this stuff. And so there was a lot of Iranian involvement. If you go back to the first deployment, the base that we stayed at, where I said with the morgue, where we ate off of, it was a main Iraqi base about 60 miles from the Iranian border, right? And so there was that, like, what was the Iran-Iraq war? I think 8 years.
Yeah.
And so I might have this number exact, but I think there were something like 12 to 14 bunkers built into the side of this mountain. They were like the size of a football field. Some of them were 2 football fields, you know, and they were just full of Scud missiles, frog missiles, anti-tank mines, all kinds of stuff. Well, the Marines that got there prior to us in this first deployment, I think only 7 of these things were left. The rest of them, the locks had been cut and had Persian writing. Iranians, they'd just taken all this stuff. So where it went, I don't know. Hezbollah,
So
Hamas,
they went and raided it.
they went and raided it.
While the Iraqis were
While
worried
the
about,
Americans were pushing.
Yeah, while the Iraqis were worried about America coming from Kuwait, they went in and raided it.
They raided it because these bases, they started like disbanding and just everybody leaving, and the Iranians were ready. So Iran had, in just that instance, let's say 5 football fields full of munitions to hand out, and their main goal was to create chaos. They're Shia aligned, but they funded a lot of Al-Qaeda Sunni stuff and allowed that to happen because it was good for them, right?
Really?
Chaos for the Americans.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of weird things. I'm not really, you know, have these weird kind of like things that happened in Abu Saida. It's up north of Baquba, and it was the only Shia enclave. And it's surrounded by Al-Qaeda, which was coming into ISIS, which at this time, you know, bin Laden had come down on Zarqawi and been like, hey, you're too violent. And basically Zarqawi was like, go to hell, bin Laden. We'll start our own.
Yeah.
Zarqawi gets killed, and then that's when Abu Omar al-Baghdadi comes into power. And so this Shia enclave, I mean, this dude was like a mafia guy. He would have slit my throat regardless. But he was in trouble. He was completely surrounded, and Al-Qaeda was really encroaching on. He had his own police force. He had his own stuff. Sheikh Hassani liked ginger ale. And so I started working him, and he taught, you know, I tell you, this guy and his sons would have killed me, but I learned a lot from this man. I use it still in marketing today. Now, there's another book written about the 3 cups of tea, but you hear that a lot in the Middle East and whatnot. And I show up with my notepad ready for him to give me all these Al-Qaeda names. And he's like, oh, this is the first cup of tea, and we're going to just talk about family and learn each other and whatnot. And so it became a relationship that he gave us a lot of intel, and we helped him out a little bit, and back and forth. Now, like I said, there's never any point that I didn't know that this is, you know, this could be bad.
So this is one of those things. You said this at lunch, and I went, oh, I can't wait to dive into this. So you're becoming an interpreter or a guy that is thrust into intelligence because of circumstances.
Mhm.
You were doing pull-ups, basically.
But yeah, I was
Right?
doing pull-ups.
And you get entrusted into sitting down with this mafia leader of a very, very powerful group of people to get as much out of him as possible. Was there any point you're like, I think I'm way over my freaking skis on this?
I was always over. I mean, I always felt over my head. And the problem was that there were other people there that thought that I was like, I mean, they were like, well, you're 2 steps ahead of us. Like, so I just had to fake it sometimes.
So you didn't have, so now I look at this and go, there wasn't a CIA person or an intelligence, Army intelligence like built.
The Army intelligence guys are sitting in an office drinking mango juice. Like, they're not out there in the field. Like, and don't get me wrong, you've got CIA doing stuff, but they're working on way bigger projects. I mean,
And I want to reiterate this because timelines are different and people think differently. This is the 90s. This is
no, this would have been 2006.
Oh, okay, so this
is the Iraq War.
Okay, so this is the Iraq War, not the W War. This is the W War, not the Okay.
So, go ahead.
So this is you're entrusted in this intelligence, and you get tasked with getting as much information out of this mafia, very powerful guy, and
I didn't get tasked with it. I asked if I could go do it.
Really?
Because I saw the influence that Iran was having, and I said, I could see the importance that Iran was worried about this. I could see the stuff coming through. And I had the leeway. Captain Feud really trusted me. We had done some really good stuff. And I had other people that helped me. I mean, Moose, the interpreter, oh man, dude, he was awesome. He was an Iraqi guy. I mean, we used to do stuff like we had these guys, we called them these Syrian guys coming from the Iranian border. They didn't have any weapons. They had tens of thousands of dollars. And so they were like, you ain't got nothing on us. We're not saying anything. So we've got them in this detention center. And Moose is like, I have an idea. He's like, you got to promise me no closed fists when you hit me. Just open fist. I'm like, what? So I basically went in there and beat Moose up, threw him in the cell beside him, and he just whimpered and pretended like he was asleep and listened to him all night.
Oh my gosh.
And we got a lot of stuff out of that. But that wasn't my idea. That was Moose's. That was
the Iraqi guy. So all right. Yeah. So you get in is this the Blue Eyes?
I'm getting to Blue Eyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're interested in this, and he goes, "This is the first teacup."
Yeah. So from the next time, he starts inviting me to dinner, and like I don't have any way. Like I'm not trained in any like.
You're not an intelligence officer.
You know, I've learned and I'm doing it, but I mean, I'm just like, okay, how do I get information from him? And so I made up an email, hasselhoff@hotmail.com, that I would
Baywatch, baby, Baywatch.
And I would talk to these people and it because like now Army Intel, somebody's going to hear this and be like, oh my God, he wasn't on SIPRnet. Blah. These, how could I, you know,
You're not going to happen.
It's just what was going on, and so I'm working this, and I mean this guy's getting good stuff, and so at the time you got to understand that my limitations. If I got a detainee, JAG was after Abu Ghraib. JAG was coming down on us so hard they would say you had 72 hours to come up with a prosecution case. Like I'm a New York detective, right? I'm out in the field leading a team in combat. I still have my own team.
Right.
And Sheikh Sani had a police force. So if I had Al-Qaeda guys, I could literally take legally detainees because they were policemen. So I'm eating dinner with Sheikh Sani a lot, and it was kind of developing this, you know, I mean, he gave me hugs. I've got pictures of him and his sons who were like Iranian mafia hit squad dudes were like becoming really friendly with me. And it was people were starting to hear about it. Like, are you serious? You're going into Abu Saida and like getting this information? I'm like, well, it took time. It took this. I speak the language. And so I'm fast forwarding, a bit. And a Defense Intelligence Report comes out that says, hey, the Iranians are not happy with the progress the United States Army is making in Abu Saida. They are sending an agent called Abu Blue Eyes to intervene. So I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like this is a bad James Bond movie, right? So one, the Iranian government cares that I'm taking Sheikh Hassani ginger ales. That's pretty odd to me. Two, they're sending a covert agent called Abu Blue Eyes. And like, okay, whatever. Dumbest name ever. So it's like, I don't know, a week or two afterwards, and I'm in Abu Saida, and I go eat with Sheikh Hassani, and the mood is just different. His sons are like arms crossed. I go up, kind of put my arm around him, and he's just like, the mood's different. Something's changed. Sheikh Hassani basically gives us food. It's just like, I don't have any information for you. And so I come out, and one of my Joes, who is supposed to be with the Humvee, is like standing there waiting on me. I mean, there's other guys because we got guys guarding around. And he's like, hey, some weird crap's going on while you were there at dinner. I'm like, okay, well, tell me. He said, well, there's this guy who looks like a really kind of sophisticated guy, but he's wearing private rank as a police officer. And so private rank in the Iraqi police is like a super low rung.
Yeah, like.
And he's like, he's not going to any of the NCOs and talking. He's going to all of our Joes. And he's asking which routes we take. How do we get in? Like things that shouldn't be asked. So I was like, okay. Can you try to get a picture of this guy? I go back over there. He's like, yeah, he's running over there. So I go back and I get some ginger ale, try to give it to Sheikh Hassani. He's like, whatever. I mean, like I said, mood's completely changed. I turn around and there's this guy standing there with the bluest eyes I've ever seen, brown skin, dark hair. And he's just standing there and he points at my name tab and he goes, Kinser, the one who speaks Arabic. Hi, I don't even remember what he said his name was, Bobby. And I'm just like, you gotta be freaking
in
kidding
English?
me.
He says this in English?
Speaking perfect English.
Oh.
And I am like, okay, yeah, cool. And he's like, hey, I've really got some ideas. We should talk. We should meet. Why don't you come to dinner with me and my wife's house? And I already know who all these police officers are. I've never seen this guy. And so instantly in the back of my head, I'm like, hey, and other people are like, hey, do you want to go talk? I'm like, no, let's get out of here.
We're rolling.
Let's get out of here. And this guy starts emailing hasselhoff@hotmail.com.
Uh-oh.
And so I have to go to my commander and be like, I think that an Iranian spy is emailing me on my unofficial Hotmail account that I shouldn't have, that I'm using to talk to informants.
Am I going to end up in prison?
And so, the relationship was dead after that. It was really dead. We never got anywhere with them. We never did it. I mean, and not long after that, Abu Saida got hit by Al-Qaeda with multiple suicide bombs. There was one with chlorine used. I mean, we're talking massive casualties. Massive.
Wow.
And you can go and you can look up. If you type in, I mean, you'll still find news articles about it. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was like 50, 60 people killed in the market. Al-Qaeda knew the importance of where, Abu Saida being in that area. Iran knew the importance of it. And
it was a pinch point.
We got in the middle of it. And, it's just one weird little chapter that somehow I stumbled into Abu Blue Eyes. And, it's.
So after that,
we never had another.
Abu Blue Eyes disappeared.
He was still there. He stayed there. I went back there a couple of times with some Iraqi army units. They didn't want to talk to me. They didn't.
Really?
Yeah, they were done with me.
Huh.
It was just like the mood had just completely changed. And
I'm pretty sure there's a movie in that.
so there was, I went back one time where he helped me. And I had this guy who was admitted Al-Qaeda. And at the time, Jag would do stuff with us. Like, okay, they shot rockets at you, but when you detained them, their rockets were buried underground. How can you prove that they were going to shoot the rockets at you? That's the kind of stupid stuff Jag used to do to us. And so we have this guy who has basically admitted and bragged about that he's like an enforcer for Al-Qaeda, that if informants happen, he rapes the women and children. This dude's a pretty bad dude. And so I was going to pass him off to the Iraqi army. And then we got basically some stuff happened and everybody started moving. The Iraqi army was like, we can't take him. So I'm coming up on my 72 hours where I got to release this guy.
Right.
And so I got some of the Iraqi army guys. I was like, well, let's take a ride. And going to Abu Sayyaf at this point, now you were running through Al-Qaeda stuff. It was not something that was
It was
for
a
like,
gauntlet, not a
yeah,
fun
you
place.
didn't want to go through it. And so we pull up, I get out and I see one of the sons. I was like, hey, look, I have something for you. Right. And he's just kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, look, I got an Al-Qaeda guy that's like a super enforcer. I need to turn him over to your police force. He's like, let me go ask my dad. So Sheikh Hassani comes out. I'm telling you, arms crossed. I tell him, look. Now, we put a hood over this guy's head, and he's just laughing. He's like, y'all are going to have to release me. And I open the door, and he sees where he's at.
And completely both down legs.
He's grabbing onto the Humvee. He ripped a fingernail off trying to stay in the Humvee. And, that was at that time. Because CNN told us it wasn't Civil War. But this was a bad dude. This was a real, real bad dude. And probably worse than Sheikh Hassani. But that was the last interaction, that I had with the Hassanis. But it was a weird time. And it worked. It worked. And I think enough papers were written about it by our commanders and people started doing this more. And then a guy that worked for me, kind of joked around when he got moved to Alaska. He called me. He's like, guess what? Because of your dumbass, I got to go learn Farsi. They're making me do your position now that I got to go do this in Afghanistan. And they tried it for a little while. And I think the Army did get smarter, right? They added anthropologists and things like that to go and do pieces. But, I went back. We had a reunion. They were telling me like, yeah, man, I was talking to their intel officer and all their guys. And they're like, that stuff y'all were doing, it's all drones now.
Really?
He's like, yeah, we've almost completely eliminated, human intelligence and whatnot. And like I said, I know this is not official. It's not, I hate when you hear these war stories that I hear them all the time that sound crazy, but this is, it's kind of what happened. I tell you a funny story that I had, more stupid spy stuff. We were back in Zagania and I'm in the market one day. And this is like the Sunni Al-Qaeda side that we're trying to kind of tame. This guy bumps into me and just shoves this piece of paper into my hand. So I don't look at it. And I get back to the base and I unfold it. And it's, hi, my name is Agent 1234. And I work for the Iraqi, intelligence. It's kind of like your CIA. This is a number that you need to have your commander call in to confirm that I'm legit. All this stuff. And I'm like, what? Go to my commander and I give it to him. And at this point, enough stupid stuff's happening where I should have actually taken. I'm like, okay, He comes back and he's like, it's legit.
Oh my gosh.
So I meet this guy again and he's like, I want my code name to be Arizona. And so I'm like, why?
He now lives in Scottsdale. In the next place.
So he liked Western movies and whatnot. And he basically provided intel to us and to the Iraqi army unit there. And stuff started getting a little bit weird, right? And he's like, hey, do you have any confiscated pistols or anything that you could get me? I was like, yeah. We took this pearl-handled 25 auto. You can have it. And so I give the pistol to Arizona. It's like a week later. I see him and his hand's all bandaged up. I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, the pistol, I went to go shoot it to test fire it, and the pistol you gave me blew up in my hand.
Whoops.
Like, sorry.
Didn't check the bolt, did you?
I don't know how old that thing is. It was probably in a
Probably
in a
in a
fire-rated safe that
The house got hit by an RGB.
and so
It's okay.
Yeah.
It was in a safe that the essential oils company owns.
The oil's heated up and didn't lube it properly.
Oh my gosh. This is crazy. So there's so many stories I want to talk about. And I didn't know any of this.
Oh,
and we've had a lot of cocktails over cocktails telling stories. You're in this, and what's the next step out of Iraq? Because this is an interesting story for me.
What do you mean the next step?
So you obviously go through the military, you do a bunch of other stuff I know, but then you get out. And
yes. So I did get hit with a couple IEDs and got hurt, medevaced, and when I got back, I mean, I'm not like missing a leg or not. I'm not. There's so many other.
No,
guys
but I've seen the scar down the back of your neck, and it's pretty damn significant.
I've had, so I had to get a bunch of surgeries out and done, and it was just sort of a wear and tear. I got hit with 8 IEDs. I wouldn't say all 8 hurt me. Bombs are weird. They flow sometimes differently, and one of the bombs that hurt one of my really good friends really, really bad, and he's still was not really recovered today. I was in between him and the bomb, and it knocked me out, but it didn't really do much to me. I mean, that's a Wade.
I have never heard that
we were
before.
pushing the limits, trying to antagonize the enemy. And we did it one too many times, and they were ready for us the next time we tried to we were trying to get their snipers to come out. It was a dumb idea, really dumb idea. And so the bomb goes off and knocks me out real quick. It went off right beside my window. Right before that, we'd had an anti-tank mine go off. I wasn't close to it, but it blew up my Humvee, hurt my driver. Not catastrophically, but it couldn't run. So basically, I was like, well, I'll just drive Wade's. And so you got 2 NCOs in the front seat. Probably not the best idea.
Yeah.
But so that bomb hit me, and I'll never forget. I'm just kind of coming to, and Wade actually had SF medic training, and he's trying to treat me. And as he's doing it, and I'm coming through, I'm looking at him, and he's slurring. And I'm like, are you okay, man? And he really, it messed up. I mean, yes, there's some brain damage that happened, but it messed up his inner ear, messed up, portions of him. Like to this day, Wade still struggles. I mean, and Wade was a hard charger, and that, for whatever reason, I don't, I can't tell you why. But I mean, that bomb was right outside my window. And then there's other blasts that just rocked my world. I mean, I got hit with one. God, it messed my insides up so bad. I mean, it was like 2 weeks where I felt like, I had glass in my stomach and things like that. And that one was further. I mean, it's especially with that ammonium nitrate. It's like almost like a plasma that goes out. Like, so
you were telling me stories about
being a
plastic
connoisseur
in your face and that.
Yeah, more in the shoulders and whatnot, but good times. But so when I got out, when you're saying, hey, I got out, and I was like, what do I want to do? What am I going to do? Because at first I'm like, oh, well, I'll just go work for Blackwater.
Did you ever think you were going to be a career?
No. Well, I take that back. I did. There was a point after the first deployment that I decided that I wanted to go SF back. And I went to the Q course, and I got kicked out for cheating.
That's pretty strong.
And I mean, it's like hey, if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying. I left the boundary on the south side. Wouldn't have been a big deal, but some guy had run that night and a cadre stepped in the hole, hurt his ankle or something. And when they caught me, I ran. and so, they were like, you're done. And I think that was okay. It was okay. Right. Because that was more of I think a response of like, hey, came from war. I'm single. I'm just gonna keep doing this. This is, and so at that point, I mean, I don't think after that I thought I'd go be for life. I really don't. But the first time I was in combat, I was really stupid. I was the one that volunteered to be everything. And then I'd met my now wife in between there. And she kind of made me think a little bit more. Even though she wasn't there, I was like, I don't know if I want to climb in that hole. Like,
it's not all about me anymore.
I kind of like this one. I might try to not die before. But when I got out, I was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, you know what? I want to go back to what I want to do, hunting, marketing, whatever it is. And so at the time, I still had these surgeries to go through, like, right? So there was still, because there's a bunch of different, I don't want to get, it's just boring, but it was like, you got to get this here and then you get another one. It was just kind of like a pattern of surgeries. So at the time, the Army was like, okay, we don't want you to be idle, right? You need to go find a job. And so they have this job list of, all this stupid stuff. And the same thing happened at Fort Bragg. And basically at Fort Bragg, when I got some surgeries there, I got to work on the base newspaper. And they were like, as long as he's
doing something.
So, but the key is you are not allowed to get paid. And so all these base jobs are just crappy. And I went in San Antonio. I was like, hey, look, I'd like to try to go find something to get me prepared for out. And they're like, okay, And so I went into Texas Trophy Hunters and I met with Horace Gore, who is he was the editor. He still is.
Yeah.
He's been the editor since 75. And
so he's got to be in his 80s, doesn't he?
Yeah. And how you describe Horace is like, if you imagine Gus from Lonesome Dove, crank up the cranky, crank up the grumpy. It's Horace. And so basically
Gus on his deathbed.
Yeah. So I showed Horace and all this stuff, and I was like, here's the catch. I can't be paid. And Horace was like, you're hired.
Wait, I'm sorry. I thought there was a catch.
Yeah. So he got me, he was really struggling with magazine covers, so I'd go and try to, so it was hard because you get a close-up of a whitetail. It's almost like bow hunting. And so I did that, started writing for them, and at the same time, an opportunity came up with Military Warrior Support Foundation for me to take over as I got out their recreation program. And so I had leeway to design that as I didn't want it to be like some of these other hunts where they just gave them a free rifle, gave them all this stuff. I wanted it to be like, hey, we're going to teach these guys how to adapt and overcome so they can, the old adage of give a man a fish or teach him.
Right.
And then we had a slew of Gold Star kids. And so anybody that doesn't know, Gold Star just means it's a term referring to these kids' dads were killed in combat. And so I ran that for a few years.
Program.
Yeah, man, I love it. And all those kids are like in college now, or most of them are graduated. And so we had Purple Heart Ranch in that program. We had 2 properties in Texas. We had 3 at one point, some in Kansas and North Carolina, and basically just tried to run this as like, hey, and even with the kids, like I took them hunting once, but then the next time it's like, all right, what blind are we going to? Where are we hunting? Are we going to hunt in a blind? Are we going to stalk? You're looking at the wind. You're looking at the moon.
So you hunted with these kids multiple times.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't a one and done.
No, I had them, in some of my, the guys that I hate to not name in some of the other ones, but I mean, my favorites that I love, Grayson, Tanner, and Carson. And so Grayson's dad was F-16 pilot that was. This is a crazy story. Delta had captured some high-value targets and got one of the helicopters shot down, and were basically being surrounded by, it would have been ISIS at the time, technicals, and they're getting their asses. I mean, they can't. They're now compromised.
Right.
And Grayson's dad is the closest one around and does a gun run and destroys some of the vehicles and comes back around, and whether they hit the tail or he hit too low, it doesn't, who knows?
Doesn't matter. He's not
Boom. And so I keep forgetting it's ISIS at that time. ISIS got his body and had his body for years. I mean, they were able to prove it was him by some DNA on the cockpit and whatnot. Tanner's dad was an Apache pilot that was shot down over Baghdad. Bad deal, going in to help guys. And Carson's dad was a Delta guy who, doing a raid, and if my recollection of the story is right, they came in, a little bird on the top tried to go through, and there was a brick wall built to block. So when they came through, it was just an ambush, and he got shot and killed.
Wow.
And so those guys, I've watched them. Like, one of my favorite stories about Carson, and I got a good one in Grayson too, but I loved that they started taking friends of theirs out hunting, right? Like,
so they're passing it down.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily they weren't Gold Star kids or whatever, but they started. So Carson goes hunting in Virginia one time, takes a buddy, and I mean, they're trying to clean this deer. It's so cold that they're sticking their hands in, like the Hoth episode. And Grayson calls me one night at like 10:30. He's hunting on his grandfather's land for turkey. He took a buddy. He's like, I need some help. I'm sorry to call late. We've been plucking this turkey for like 2 hours. I'm like, you're plucking the turkey? What are you? It's like, no, take the knife. Cut the...
You don't have to make it look like the turkey dinner turkey, man.
That's what they were thinking. They were like plucking the turkey.
Well, now I know how long it takes to pluck a turkey. I've never tried.
So to me, I loved, that was where I felt like, I was like, man, I'm so, and they're all great kids now.
That's awesome.
And that was, and then on the wounded guy side, I had JD who, JD's missing 2 legs and an arm. And JD was like the guide a lot. So you'd get a guy that's like feeling sorry about himself for missing a leg. And I'm like, oh.
This is the Gimsbuck guy?
Yeah, this is the Gimsbuck guy. Yes, JD, I've told the Gimsbuck story. I'll save you. I won't tell it on this podcast.
You and Kevin.
Yeah.
Running for your life as you choking him out.
So JD's, I mean, and then JD went on to create his own kind of foundation that didn't necessarily focus on wounded guys, but he had a lot of guys in his unit that committed suicide, and he just wanted guys to get together from their old units and, get together. And so it was great to kind of see that kind of stuff work full circle. And